Chapter 16, Phantasmagoric Road. Breaker, breaker, this is heartache. Now hear me loud and clear. I got a memory on my tailgate, Lord, and old Smokies on my rear. I'm gonna chase my headlights till I can drink me blind. I'm gonna be drinking and driving that woman right off of my mind. Johnny Paycheck. A rudimentary theater of selves. They say we're heading to a calamitous disorder, that we are entropic beings with a foot in the grave, but there's a caveat. For entropy to work, we have to be a discrete system, closed off, a vacuum. That's the thing that dies, the self. A growing system, something with life in it, is an open system, something that has energy passing through it. The energy may travel on into chaos, but while the sun shines, we're going about our business of making this phantasmagoric road ever more complicated, day to day. My Uncle Paul answered his phone at home with a high halloo. He was at brunch with his crypto husband and a man in a fake sea captain's hat, and another man with frosted hair and a desperate laugh. At home there was some joy in him, but in the car it was back to the cruel, hard, curmudgeonly Yankee A's and the bitterness of reality. He dropped me off without getting out of the car at a motel with hourly rates near Langley, Virginia, where CIA men took secretaries for a quick lunchtime fuck. This was the particular hot pillow house that Dick, once a lunchtime CIA fucker himself, felt was the perfect place for this voyage of discovery to commence. Parked by the chintzy motel room doors was the rusted Sacred Heart Academy bus, with Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception on the rolling marquee. Standing in the door of room number 8, by that sign of infinity, was Fayaway, waiting for me. This was my first clear perspective on the river system of hard surfaces, where I first saw the enigma of the road, the American myth that represents the universal paradox to the gringo numbskull. It's centered in the senses in your head and goes out to the end of the vanishing point, west of Kansas and Nebraska, out to the infinite, blessed be it, and back into your own head. Up close, personal, and infinitely far, to those two converging lines of grassy ditches, getting closer together, closer but never meeting, touching where your vision is no longer functional, but the atoms never touch. I've driven millions of miles, burning it all up like a good gringo, 40 or 50 times around this earth, trying to get to that vanishing point, but it remains far off. Piling into that Catholic cast-off, a kid asked Bill, "Where are we going?" And he said, "To the end of the fucking road, man, the end of the fucking road." We drove south on 40,000 Roman miles of interstate, cast concrete arteries feeding the way, gravel burned and gracefully overpassed, controlled and surrounded by neatly mowed lawns. Limestone burnt and ground to cement powder, mixed with sand and gravel into America's Parthenon or Pantheon, cast over a web of steel rebar and mild steel mesh, rolled out under 300,000 furlongs of ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. Tire polished and stained with trillions of dots of petroleum distillates, slowly stripping and leveling it down to the gravel aggregate, smooth as a glacial wash, all the way out to the end. The shallow Rio Grande, where gringo concreteness terminates and the end begins, and time and place become one predatory thing for the gringo blockhead. Bill drove the freezing bus into a frozen world with his Class A North Carolina license, stuck in the World War II German Army wallet his dad gave him. Bill duly passed back acid dots on paper from his chemist friend, like clandestine tickets to Valhalla for the suburban detritus, sitting cattle-eyed in the Sacred Heart bus. Bill added a few of the trucker's traditional little white pills to his acid, to aid his personal concentration and fluency for the all-night drive ahead. hands often on the wheel, but sometimes up in this weird hallelujah to the distance, joking to himself obscurely with incomprehensible jests. Dick had taken the lead, but soon lost us with Peg and the Dutch math teacher, who was always the subject of cruel jokes because she'd been a prisoner of the Japanese in Java as a teenager, and we all imagined the worst. Drafting the bus was a fat-faced teacher in his Volvo, a name Mexicans would interpret as I puke. He was about 25 and had a lot of lips in his articulations when he spoke authoritatively to his wife, who suffered chronically from migraines, and all the students seemed to make the migraines worse, and she had nothing to do with us. In the back seat was Teacher John, hair and glasses still perfectly arranged as John Lennon. The only adult on the bus was the cook, who made it very clear her seat was the booby prize. She got on the bus, kicked a pencil-necked kid out of the front seat, pulled her ski hat down over her eyes, crossed her arms hard and feigned sleep or unconsciousness as best she could the whole drive. She was a heavy woman of about 22, who walked everywhere with determination, swinging her arms. She'd bore anyone who'd listen to her woes. The only reason I'd work for this asshole Dick is to pay off my student loans. If you work at a school, it reduces them. It is not like this turd pays enough to actually pay them off. Still, if I knew what the job was going to be like, I'd have walked. Nothing is worth this shit. Fayaway and I sat towards the front, looking at each other's hands, talking quietly of the things in each other's minds beneath a growing ruckus of acid takers. We showed each other our passport pictures, my photo of a 12-year-old me in school coat and tie, looking fat-faced, dissatisfied, and young. I'd gotten it to go to Martinique as the only kid, with my parents and uncle. My uncle laid on the beach, turning 45 degrees every 15 minutes by the clock, and got terribly burnt. We ate well. Hers was a red UK passport, more beat up than mine, with lion, unicorn, and crown embossed on the cover. She was not alone in the photo. Her mother was behind her and her sister beside. Fayaway looked no more than 12, her sister no more than 10. All three had round, collared white blouses, and hair pulled back in simple, identical ponytails. They all had the same black pupils, deep and probing. While the others raved, we rehashed our stories as you do alone in bed, in the middle of the night, tweaking it each time to try and fix it. We told each other nearly everything in the talks in her green and blue room, but so much seemed to need repeating, all so sober amid the ever-ascending chaos on the bus. I had a taste of anticipation that knotted my stomach. It was not the love that we knew was coming, and not the great unknown that lay on the other side of the flat Rio Bravo del Norte. It was a sense that every nuance of each coming moment was a microcosm of whatever it was growing in the space between us, into some incomprehensible larger event. It was all there before our unknowing eyes, on the bus, in the dark. When I told her Moby Dick was the key to everything, I looked only at my hands in my overstatement. Obliquely, I intonated things about the cult of ancestor worship I grew up in, preached to me aloud in the bathtub, echoing sonorously, grandly, full of pride and allegory, like he'd read it to 6th graders and in his senior seminars, and to others in between. Herman's greatness was his exclusive possession, as if he'd made all his ideas, as if he hadn't just compiled them like everyone else, as if those connections hadn't just come into his mind from an unknown source. When my dad told me I had the most in the family, he diminutively called his great-grandfather Hermie, who was cast out to sea by his father's bankruptcy and death, becoming the narrator Ishmael, like the old Ishmael was cast out by Abraham in favor of his younger brother, just like my dad was overshadowed by his younger brother. Forgotten in his own lifetime, scribbling out Billy Budd, never finishing it. The manuscript found in my dad's aunt's barn in a trunk. She gave the book to Harvard even though she was broke, and it became a big hit. They made a movie. So many myths in the pathos of the misunderstood, unrecognized genius, and we, my father and I, were meant to tread this path to inevitable failure. I couldn't speak of the sympathetic magic I was using. It was too sad and bogus. But I figured I'd been cast out on a celestial sea of visions and taken up the autodidact's torch by quitting school at 15 like Herman did. Even if I was technically in school, I figured, as a bad school, Judgment Ridge wasn't a real school. She told me her father's family came to Kenya from Britain in the soldiers' settlement scheme after World War I. They started a coffee farm, and he went to English school in Nairobi, and then university in London, still blackened from the Blitz, when rationing was still very deficient. Her mom was a Londoner who he met at university. After he got his degree in engineering, they moved to Uganda to work on a dam, where Fayowe was born a year before I was. They returned to Britain, and he got a higher degree in aeronautics, and then he came to the home of the brave to work in the defense industry. She told me in her very slight accent of her old boyfriend's motorcycle, and that it was concern over this machine that landed her at Judgment Ridge. There were stories of her dad's hemorrhoids, and many tales of her loose little sister's competitions with her, and how they always failed, and how she was never going anywhere because she didn't study. I wondered momentarily if I was going nowhere since I didn't study, but she knew that and didn't seem to mind where I was going in my slowly spiraling downward mobility. There was time to trade our family's mythologies, too. She told me after university her parents traveled all over Africa together. On a ferry barge crossing the Zambezi, Fayowe's father tried to trade her mother for a leather hassock. He proposed soon after, and they still had the hassock. I told her the first member of my mother's family came to Maine in the 1600s. He changed his name to Hercules on the boat and disappeared into the North Woods to be a deer skinner. A historian friend of my dad's found a colonial court document about a descendant of Hercules who was the first ferryman on the Piscataqua. Evidently, some guy crossed into Maine and tried to dodge paying. He chased him down and beat him up and took his mittens as a pledge for payment. When the guy finally coughed up, my forefather wouldn't give him his mittens back, so he was taken to court and forced to give them up. This case of the mittens is the only reason anything about the ancestral ferryman is remembered. I told her about Nina and Herman and the generals in the Revolution, and of the long holiday dinners in the candlelight. I told her my parents were escaping their life, how my dad had taken some kind of sabbatical, and how my mom just stopped her job at the school, that they were going to London and would be out of reach for 6 months at least. The art show story was retold in detail. It was the only thing I'd told her in all the time I knew her that she didn't get, and of course, I didn't want to explain it in any real way. In the middle of the night, Bill started a rumor that there was a little man running beside the bus, dancing to Eddie Arnold's It's a Sin, blasting on the crackly bus radio. Soon all those trippers were seeing the little person too, running and somersaulting, while Eddie strummed out, "It's a sin, my darling, how I love you, because I know our love can never be. It's a sin to keep this memory of you, when silence proves that you've forgotten me." Brian started yelling with his teeth shining in the darkness, "There's a motherfucking little man dancing beside the motherfucking bus," over and over. Then he screamed, "He looks like Manson. "Get back, you little pussy lapper." Then he just screamed, until everyone was screaming, except for Fayaway, me, and the forlorn cook, still feigning sleep. Bill was screaming too, harmonizing with the trippers' chorus, like a dog howling along with a fire truck, while Fayaway and I talked soberly, in a sincere attempt at total honesty without spin, which I had experienced with no one before, except Gertie and my sister. Near dawn, we stopped talking, and the bus grew quiet. I thought of Bill's little man, and all the things out in the bigness of the night, as Fayaway fell off to sleep with her head on my shoulder. The gauges lit Bill's face from beneath, and he looked maniacal. The Immaculate Heart bus had the small motor, but Bill drove it like he drove semis, hard. We blew out a hose at dawn outside of Mobile. Steam began to funnel out from under the hood. Bill said, "By rights, we should have blown out more." Steam trailed us off the highway. Hurricane Camille and the Freedom Ride were still stinging that hateful little truck stop where we got the hose fixed. The remorseful, hairy trippers drank hot coffee and babbled about the little man's shenanigans and other such visionary topics, while the waitresses looked on in distressed disgust and contempt, all agreeing they needed to do something, but they couldn't think what. Outside, Elise, a beautiful girl of 16, with ethereal, unbrushed white blonde hair, walked wearing nothing more than the diaphanous slip and crinolines from a 20s wedding dress, panties, and black men's army boots, untied, tongue out. She scuffed across the potholes of the parking lot. A mechanic stopped working, unable to whistle, dropped his wrench with a clang, and went, "Shazam!"